How do we get to another vision without first executing the current vision? This is not the first time Ruto is in power. He was in power in 2013. His administration back then, because he was voted in as a deputy president, and he had equal control over governance and government rhetoric, just as he does today, seemed to give a wide berth to Vision 2030. And for 10 years, that administration was silent on most of the premises and the policies that were enshrined in the Vision 2030 that was supposed to birth a different Kenya, a prosperous one. And after he took power in 2022, when he now has the ability to influence the conversation into the development of this country, we've not had him reference Vision 2030. Well, not until yesterday. So we wonder, how do you come up with a new vision without first executing the first vision? So the president's speech went by something that looked like we're supposed to have a paradigm shift from Vision 2030 to a new vision. And before he got to that, he said countries are built on discipline and design. So as James Mulamba, I'm wondering which discipline and which design? Because if it's the discipline of buying legislators to impeach Gachagua, then I wouldn't want that discipline. If it is the design of state capture of independent institutions, as James Mulamba, I do not want that design. If it is the design of scandals from the fertilizer to the oil scandal, then I do not want that design, as James Mulamba. On the second premise, the president says we should defend the Constitution of Kenya and protect it because there are those that fought for it. Then I wonder, when did the president start supporting the Constitution? Last I checked, he decampaigned it, and he was not for the Constitution 2010. And then I reference myself to the same Constitution, and it reminds me of the right to life, which doesn't seem to have a meaning in this country. It reminds me to the liberty of freedom of association and freedom to protest and picket, which seems to be a crime in this government. Then in that same Constitution, under Article 248, the independence of commissions and institutions is reiterated, but that seems to not have any meaning in this government, because we've seen it usurp the power of commissions left, right, and center. And it's been served, this government has been served with court orders upon other court orders for flaunting the same constitution it now appears to defend. As for the third premise, the president appeared to preach unity over political division. And I'm wondering, does unity still include the anti-riot or anti-protest remarks that gave an order for shoot to the leg? Does the same unity extend to referring to young people as anarchists and treasonous criminals? And does that same unity include the conversation on hate speech that has been peddled by some of the close allies of the president, including Murkomen, Duale, and the list goes on? And one would probably avidly say, maybe they're acting on orders from the president if he does not appear to call them out by name. Because every time he has some of these grand ornate speeches, he goes on a rant about how we need to have political tolerance, we need to bring to an end hate speech and disunity and so on and so on. But he does not name and shame. So one would say probably he sends them to speak the language that he wouldn't say to the public, given that they are his close allies. So next time, Mr. President, when you are giving such speeches, please name your cabinet secretaries and your parastatal heads and those that are in government, including legislators who appear to have a sharp tongue for a divisive politics. And as I wind up, the president gave a scorecard of himself. The first time I've seen someone mark his own exam. And in it he said he acknowledged that he inherited a troubled economy. What Gachagua said were empty coffers. And that he has turned around the economy of Kenya, quoting some figures from the inflation that he says has dropped and how the economy has grown. But do we then feel that growth? And then in his own assessment, he says that his administration has delivered affordable housing and universal health coverage. Which universal health coverage, Mr. President? The one that does not work. And as for the affordable housing, I would go back to the words of Sifuna. How many slums have you alleviated or ended or eradicated if the entire idea of the affordable housing was supposed to eradicate slums? Why do we need affordable houses in the rural areas? He forgot to mention that we needed a paradigm shift from the current heavy-handedness, and we needed this administration to go back to the governing principles of the Constitution that even in the Constitution itself are written just before we discuss development. So we cannot get to development before getting to the rule of law, before getting to social justice. And on his last submissions was a tribute to Raila, which probably was in order because he's trying to quote ODM and Nyanza voters. As to the proposal for a new vision, that is Vision 2050, Vision 2100, Vision 3100, or Vision 5000, whichever he pleases.
What is it that, because people are disgruntled, people are very dissatisfied with how the president conducted himself yesterday and the speech that he gave. I think it could be rated as one of the very disappointing
lackluster performance.
Yeah. And so perhaps to you, as a person who seeks to see a well-governed country, a well-implemented constitution, with the respect to the rule of law, better management of our tax, better operation and conduct of all the state agencies, ministries, departments, everything, having a country that runs as Kenyans wished for it to, guided by the constitution. What would be the things you would say you are expecting to hear yesterday substantively from the president that would have convinced you that indeed the president is in touch with the reality of the nation?
One, I would expect Mr. 6 months to actually give us a timeline that works. That's one. For policy implementation and completion of projects. Secondly, I would have wanted the president to address the issue of unemployment and the stopgap measures or long-term measures his institution is putting in place to solve this. And I would have wanted the president to address the issue of the cost of living and the interventions from his government to address the same. I would have wanted the president to at least fire some of these cabinet secretaries who've proved to be incompetent or unwilling to perform the duties for which they are mandated by the offices, including CS Murkomen, CS Duale, and some other non-performing cabinet secretaries. But he wouldn't, because he rewards loyalty and he's keeping them close so that they can campaign for him prior to 2027. I would have expected him to issue some economic interventions, policy changes. I would have expected the president to address the issue of nurses that are on strike. I would have expected the president to take a different stand on Imenti Forest, because he's been pushing to have a state lodge, a golf course, and airstrip at Meru. And I do not understand why they need to clear forest for this. You want to tell me that in Meru, the only land available to build this state lodge and this airstrip is in the middle of a forest, while his administration is preaching the conversation about planting more trees. How then do we achieve 15 billion trees if we are cutting the 100 that are at the moment? And I would have expected the president to acknowledge that is a one-man show government, just like Professor Njuguna Ndungu said, the ex-CBK boss and the former Minister for Treasury.
You would have expected him to say that? You would have expected him to say, I am in control of everything and I do everything myself?
Yes, I would have expected him. I would have expected him to subtly make some allusion to that and probably admit that he's been wrong on this. And at least give some breathing space to those under his administration or below him, because he's not giving his cabinet secretaries time to make decisions or implement the same. He is not as easy on the legislators allied to his political party, and is not easy on anyone. As Professor Njuguna Dungu said, this government is functioning on fear and fumes, and they are not delivering. Because fear has a different way of working up your mind. You wouldn't come up with decisions that you think, or policies that you think are best for the people of Kenya, because probably the president wouldn't approve of them.
I mean, that the people should consume the vision, then help the government of the day carry that vision to fruition. You know, every other time when we talk about China and everything else, we just need to pause and look at the vision that they have and what successive governments have done to implement visions that were set by previous governments. It is from one government to the other to implement that vision. Now, Kibaki came with Vision 2030, implemented it, left, expected that the next government would then take that vision and implement it. Here we're now moving away from Vision 2030, we're coming to Vision 2060, you know. But the question that many are asking, including the young people today, is, how am I part and parcel of the cog that forms this engine that then propels that vision into fruition? Because from where it is we sit, Mulamba, is this, like what you say, a one-man show? And if it's a one-man show, how do the 55 million Kenyans help implement it?
Unless we retake control and governance of this country, we will not be able to implement the visions that will be set by successive governments. Because if that same government has no interest in that vision, it just needs to set an agenda. It needs to have a distraction. It needs to come up with a PISOP. It needs to come up with something to be discussed. It is not trying to come up with a blueprint for economic development in this country, but is coming up with a conversation that would probably give it a second term in power. That's exactly where the problem is. And there's little regard for the citizens. And we've seen that with public participation in this country. We give our opinions on most of these things by way of attending public participation. We vote on certain policies, we vote on certain directions we need as a country, and that public participation exercise amounts to nothing. And our collective decision on that particular public participation is not considered. So at the same time, when you have a heavy-handed president who wants to control everything and who is a know-it-all, you are in a difficult position as a country, and as a citizenry, you are almost on the verge of giving up. And we have to reclaim this country so that our voice now appears to matter, because representation in this country does not even matter. If your legislators are bought, if the judiciary is captured, and if most of these independent commissions and offices are captured, then where then is the voice of the common man?
Now, I think the president said that great nations have been built, have been generated, have been developed, because this is work that goes into it by people who own and say, this is where we want to go.
Out of discipline.
Out of discipline, and not out of guesswork, which I think he's doing a lot of guessworking. Now, when you look at it, James, today's Kenyan youth, in my opinion, stand firmly against this regime. And they're saying, must go, must go. They seem to have declared Ruto is the outgoing president in a record 1 year, 1 week to come. Today is the 31st of July. Do you think, as we approach 2027, that now the youthful vote of the country has experienced a paradigm shift from the pains granted to them, especially by this outgoing regime? Do you think they'll behave differently?
You see, there was a time I used to hate William Ruto. Well, I still do. But at that particular time, I did not realize that we needed a bad president to invoke in us or evoke in us emotions or the civic consciousness to actually show up to vote. And there was a time when the young people of this country were disconnected and disengaged from politics. It appeared to be a game for the elite. It appeared to be way out of our league. And we had reserved this for our parents and those that were older than us. And in that zero wisdom, we lost an opportunity in 2022 to make a decision when it mattered. And we regretted that decision a few years later, actually 2 years later. And at that particular time, in our disengagement, we lost a chance to shape the narrative and the conversation as we are today. And in that disconnectedness, I think we gave William Ruto a loophole and a chance to ascend to the presidency. And we've realized that was the biggest mistake of our lifetime. I voted in 2022. Most young people did
you vote for him?
And they forgot that in not voting, someone else will show up to vote. And by not showing up to vote, you're voting for that particular person. But we have had a paradigm shift since then. As you remember, in 2024, we showed up on the streets to decry the punitive finance bill. And since then, we have been involved in every political discussion and conversation in Kenya. And that has birthed a new awakening and consciousness among the young people, which we are keen on cultivating heading to 2027 and beyond. And perhaps the conversation should not be on why aren't young people voting, or why didn't they vote in 2022, but should be on, does voting feel meaningless in this country?
Okay.
Because we are getting to that conversation. Has the political establishment made voting appear meaningless?
Is it true then that people have lost confidence in what a ballot can actually achieve?
I think this disillusionment stems from the litany of broken promises, unchecked corruption, unemployed graduates, and an non-existent track record from the already elected leaders, the ones that we have today. We have Sakaja, for example, who was a youthful senator and a youthful governor at the time of his voting in or election. And I remember some of the promises he made and his brilliant speeches, but they have amounted to nothing. And that goes for William Ruto and most of the leaders in this current regime. And the situation has been almost the same in past regimes. And then we ask ourselves, well, apart from the few governors who are performing and the few MPs, less than 10 who are performing, then does then really voting matter if we appear to change the politicians, not the politics, not the leadership, not the development record? Then it appears as if we are in a circus and we are going rounds and rounds, and this does not seem to come to an end. Today, as we speak, young people are very ready to march to State House, but not as ready to vote. Our generation has been accused of being a fast generation, from fast chargers to fast cars to a fast life to fast foods. And I think we are in for quick fixes, which probably do not deliver anything long term. But point is, the young people today are confident that marching to State House and taking William Ruto home for once and for good is sure bet, as opposed to waiting to take him home in 2027. And that goes for the other leadership positions, governors, MPs, and so on. You remember we had a conversation about recalling MPs. There was a time we were confident that recalling MPs would actually deliver a transition in leadership and actually showing up to vote on the ballot. Because the culture of stolen ballots in Kenya and in most of these African countries has found its way into our hearts and into our minds. And it has a special place in our hearts. And given that even when we appear to vote, or our parents appeared to have voted for those that appeared to be the best at that particular time, they still don't deliver. So I wouldn't as much place heavy criticism and castigation on the young people, given that most of the leaders who've been elected promising heaven have delivered hell in this country. The forgotten ballot is not a sign that the young people have stopped caring. Perhaps it is a sign that many of the young people today have stopped believing in the power of the ballot. To them, They would rather, as I said before, march to State House and have quick fixes to the problems we have than have a ballot. You've had the conversation of dictatorship in this country. It's unfortunate that some young people are thinking about having a benevolent dictator. This conversation is not domiciled to Oburu alone. Some young people today think we would rather have a military general takeover than have a democracy in which the power of the people is not reflected.
The country could be organizing on sending William Ruto home, only to replace him with another classic problem. Shouldn't it be that today the youth are saying, for anyone who wants to be a president of this great nation of ours, they must be in touch with the following issues and articulate how they intend to resolve those issues, so that way the youthful vote will have created a criteria, a checklist of presidential aspirants, and then from that you do a check off. What do you think?
Our organic civic spaces and the push for voter registration and the narrative we are pushing today, we've set the agenda and the exam for anyone who wants to lead Kenya. I don't think we are the first generation that has come up with a new marking scheme for leadership, but we are doing quite well with that conversation. Today we are saying development is good, but we would rather have moderate development and vote in a leader who cares about social justice. We would rather have moderate development, but have a leader who places the rule of law and the constitution before anything else. We would rather have a president or a governor or an MCA or a senator who respects the right to life, the right to association, the freedom to protest, and the freedom to criticize government and generally have a different or a dissenting opinion from the prevailing opinion in government. And you remember when the conversation about the candidate of Matiang'i came, the candidate of Natembeya, the candidate of Kalonzo, and to now the candidate of Sifuna, the underlying conviction, persuasion, and conversation has been on what really qualifies a leader. Before we got to Sifuna, I think we had been presidential hunting, I'm a president hunting, if you may. We had not settled on Matiang'i, we had not settled on Natembeya, we had not settled on Kalonzo or Gachagua. But there seems to be a consensus now about Sifuna, because most of the qualities we articulated back then that we thought were befitting for president have been found in Sifuna. We said we want a president who under-promises and over-delivers. We said we want a president who is in touch with the realities on the ground. We said we want a president who understands the youth problem. We said we want a president who at least has walked this path before and feels the pinch of the shoe. And we appear to have found that voice in Sifuna and in Linda Mwananchi. Probably, I think they've said they would have a collaboration between them or a coalition between them and the united opposition, and they will front one candidate in the end as the presidential flag bearer. We pray and wish that candidate is Sifuna. Perhaps, maybe with their wisdom, they would think maybe Gachagua or Kalonzo is better placed. But I warn them, if they pick Gachagua for us, the young people are not going to vote in 2027. Because we don't see Gachagua as any different from William Ruto. If you ask me as James Mulamba, I will tell you that Gachagua and William Ruto are cut from the same cloth. He may be instrumental in delivering or ushering in a new dispensation and a new regime, given that he is a good mobilizer, and that he has numbers, the ones he professes. But as a president, I think he's not a presidential material.
And for Sifuna, beyond being active in the revolt against the regime, in your opinion, has he pronounced himself on how he would resolve, for example, the economic crisis we are in today, which seems to be the crux of the matter?
Listening to Sifuna the other day, I think I was quite disappointed Some people have found reason to admire his presentation at the Explainer, but I haven't. The performance was dismal. If you'd ask me, I think maybe he had not researched before he got to that interview, or he was being nonchalant about it, or he did not want to blow his own trumpet, or perhaps he is cautious on making himself the know-it-all. Maybe he's learning from Ruto. He does not want to sound as an expert in everything. So in his humility, he wants to perhaps give a chance to those that understand different sectors better than him to offer their expertise and share their experience with Kenyans. But he should not forget that as a president, we at least expect him to have a grasp of every sector in Kenya. We expect him to understand how healthcare works and how to reform it. We expect him to understand the problems or the underlying policy issues in education, and how at least have an idea on how to solve them. We expect a president who is well-rounded, who at least understands the reforms that are needed in agriculture, and at least has a grounding of matters economics, because countries fall and rise on economics. And for him to appear clueless on the same was actually an exposure of his lack of preparedness, or his probably to some people level of unseriousness. We expected him, myself, I also expected him to at least have a background on economics and at least share what he knows with us. Sifuna is not a newbie in politics. He has been in politics for almost 15 years, even before he got elected. At least he has a grounding in economics. Or maybe he's telling us that he had no care for economics and he was not ready for the presidency, because that is how it is coming out. That this is something we are pushing on him and he was not ready for it.
I mean, the young people will come out to vote. They will come out in numbers because finally their agenda that they have set themselves is being picked and then form the conversations moving towards 2027.
A generation that can mobilize online in hours is not apathetic. It's just unconvinced. And Sifuna mentioned that he will have a team of experts who will sit down and ponder on the economic path, policies, and future of this country. And in the end, they will come up with a blueprint that he needs to share with the country. That sounds noble, but we need to remind him that as young people and as the majority in this country, we have been on the sidelines for a very long time. I think this is a golden opportunity for Sifuna to form a caucus of the young people who would share their inputs in the new blueprint, in his manifesto, in his economic agenda. And we also need to sign a youth charter, the idea of a contractual ballot with Sifuna, if he is designated as the flag bearer of the United Opposition. And we will hold him accountable with that youth charter. And we will ensure that we win as the young people of Kenya, because our votes must matter for something. We will push a conversation on ending unemployment. We will push a conversation on manufacturing and industrialization. We will push a conversation on free education. We will push a conversation on universal health care. And of course, we will push a conversation on getting capital and accessing capital in this country. Because that has been our biggest impediment to economic growth as a citizenry. And I hope and believe we'll get to that bridge. And in his general spirit of consultation, I hope he will feature in the young people who've been instrumental in pushing him to the national limelight. And it's befitting because the young people have, in a way, given him a political lifeline. Because in our conversations, we challenged campaign financing. And that has propelled him, because you remember the conversation about how Sifuna does not have money to campaign and why or how you need 7 billion shillings to campaign.
Yes.
And we came in his defense and said, you actually don't need that money. And we will support you with our few coins. And we've been fundraising to his pay bill. And we have challenged the conversation and the narrative countrywide. And for the first time, I think leaders are considering fundraising from the people to vie for elective office. And we are pushing the conversation to Kenyans that it's actually okay to not have funds. It's actually okay to not have billions to campaign.
Because that's not what it's about.
Yeah,
essentially, is what we're saying.
Yes, because that is not a metric for good leadership.
Okay.
And when you don't question the source of these campaign funds, and when you are busy dining with that particular candidate, and you forget to oversight them, if thinking that oversight and accountability starts when you elect them, that's how you start losing power.
And I could reference the 2022 campaigns. The outgoing president, William Ruto, made a constituency of the hustlers.
Yeah.
So it was about the haves and the have-nots. And the have-nots failed because he portrayed himself as a have-not, as having come from a humble background, as having worn the shoe and knew how and where it was hurting most. So people believed. And actually, he came up with a manifesto, the plan, not the 2060 plan, not the Vision 2030. He had the plan for 5 years moving forward that was meant to transform this country economically and address all the issues you are clearly mentioning: unemployment, rule of law, even do away with the tribal kingpinship and all those things. But he has not, clearly. Now, we have another opportunity. We are campaigning and looking as a country for a person who we are going to employ, because I subscribe to the thought of these are our employees. The president is my employee. I pay him as a Kenyan with our taxes. So we'll be hiring and firing on 10th of August. If we truly understand that one of the things we must work on is the economic status of this country, because if, regardless of how good our constitution is, if we mismanage our tax, if the tax injustice continues, we are just going to remain with a good constitution, but the pain points for Kenyans are just going to increase. Now here we are presented with a situation to do better, to change, to have the paradigm shift, to be deliberate, to not just be involved but also be committed to the cause and build this great nation and birth a country that we all can enjoy. Why do we need to force someone, in my opinion, like Sifuna to be a certain way to be a president? Why can we not look for somebody, in my opinion, who understands the economic matters, who knows exactly and has a blueprint today on how they would address the issues if they were sworn into office tomorrow? Because in a record 53 weeks, we are going to have a new president. Why do we have to force? Can't we just look around and agree? Personalities are not what we need. It is exact qualifications, the competencies that a person holds, whether you are young, youthful, or old. So long as you can do the job, we hire you to do the exact job you want. We don't need to hire somebody that we like. We need somebody who is competent enough to take care of everybody according to the rule of law.
I think it just caught me by surprise that Kenyans wanted Sifuna as president. And perhaps they cited his clean record. He has no corruption scandals. He is a respecter to the right of life and to the constitution. And he has voiced his support for the rule of law. He is egalitarian, or so he says. He understands the problem given his criticism for the current government. And he has the charisma, he has the conviction and the youthful energy to transform this country. That's what's going for Sifuna as at the moment. As for the grasp of the weighty national issues, including policies that need a shift or a change, reforms that are quite necessary at the moment, and the economic shift that we need as a country, I think I have not gotten that as of yet from him. Maybe we will get to that. But I have to remind you that every election is a guesswork. And generally, we are working on faith. It's a leap of faith for any candidate you decide to elect. They may be your uncle, they may be your father, they may be your cousin, they may be your bosom buddy, but in the end, you don't really know them until they capture power. So we are working on assumptions that the Sifuna we know will not change and will not betray us. And that is the same assumption Kenyans worked with, or the hustlers worked with when they voted in William Ruto, saying he's one of us, forgetting that he was a billionaire at that point, using his background as a metric for leadership. And his economic blueprint that promised heaven to Mama Mboga and Baba Boda. But I think it boils down to character for me. I know we want to run away from personalities, but you cannot forget that leadership is as well driven by your personality and your character. William Ruto was not exactly the best suited candidate in 2022. I don't know how people fell for him because I did not vote for him. His character was questionable way before 2022. How we were convinced by promises, a beautiful manifesto, an economic blueprint, and whatever Uhuru Kenyatta refers to as Mudomo Tamutamu, I am yet to fathom.
So if people know what they don't want, why does it seem so difficult then to then be able to bring in what you do want? Yeah. Because you can be hoodwinked. I can come and, spin a great tale to you today, and for some reason you fall for it. But from all of this, I think it's very clear what Kenyans do not want. And usually to then be able to ensure that what you don't want comes into play, you have to get in what you do want. So what do Kenyans want?
At this point, I think they want better leadership, and to them, better leadership is an implementation of the Constitution, a respect to the rule of law, equality, social justice, and a president, a character or a governor or a senator whose word is bankable. And I think we are having that conversation, but we have not gotten there yet, because if we've not beat tribalism, if we have not beat the heartbeat of this country, because tribalism has been used as the core mobilization strategy, we are not there yet. We need to have a paradigm shift of our conversations from tribalism to issue-based politics, to meritocracy, and to merit and character. Because when you resign yourselves to any character, any personality that comes and goes, that's the first mistake we make on the ballot. Matiang'i warned us of wash candidates before 2022, and how money launderers and racketeers and drug traffickers would be elected into office. I think at that time we didn't pay much of attention, but now we are. And as I address this conversation to my generation, I think we've done quite impressive with mobilization, but we have failed with organization. My generation needs to remember that our Twitter rants and TikTok lives do not scare politicians. They have figured us out. They have figured we are. We seem to have political life online and almost zero life on the ground. And we have failed to come up with hierarchies, to come up with structures. We've failed to actualize and concretize the youthful movement that we've had, or that we have at the moment. And if we get to 2027 without a structure, without an organization for the young people, I think we are going to lose that moment, that ballot revolution, and we might as well raise our placards in 2028. XX must go. And that would be quite unfortunate. And we need to arrest that before hell breaks loose, or so they say. Because we should not forget that noise and rage does not win elections. And that an organized minority may as well win over a disorganized majority. And it is at this juncture I still push the young people today to not only vie for these positions, but also coalesce and close ranks and have one forum that will speak for us and on our behalf. See, we cannot get into 2027 without a youthful political party. Then what then brings together our persuasions, our convictions, policies into one boat? If we are co-opted by these existing political parties and politicians, how then do we become different?
Indeed.
There has been conversation, we can win from within. Where has that gotten us? We have been from within since 2024.
Right.
Given that some young people were co-opted by politicians and political parties, what have they changed from within?